Welcome back to another episode of In Swine Versation, the modern farmer with Stewart Skinner from Imani Farms. Welcome, Stewart.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I know originally, I feel like you're the original modern farmer. It was a tagline you used on social media in 2009. I know we met then at the Ontario Pork Congress. What did that mean then, now, and how does it apply to you?
That's it. It's a really interesting question. When I started into social media, I was actually or got like started a Twitter account. I guess I was a grad student at Guelph, and but still pretty connected with my family's farming operation. And at the time, like that name really came from at that time everyone was talking about advocating for agriculture and sharing our story, and we've got to tell the consumer the good news about what we're doing on the farm. And my take was essentially, there is some of that traditional. There are things that are going to be common across centuries when it comes to farming, and then there are things that are changing every day. And so where I was going at with the modern farmer, and my original avatar was a picture of me in a pair of my grandpa's old overalls and a shirt and tie, and that was kind of, it was that hodgepodge of an acknowledgement of farmers today are running massive businesses, but they still need to understand the artistry that comes with the biological process of farming. And so that's where it came from. And when I look at it today, I think it's similar, but my own personal focus, I don't use a platform so much for industry advocacy anymore. And it's not that I don't see value, it's just life changes, and your ability and your time and where your brain wants to focus change. And a growing family and a growing farm required me to focus on that versus kind of thinking about advocacy at a more general level and trying to tell that story to consumers.
So I know you don't understand TikTok, but the originality with Twitter, was it to get information or network with producers? Because I think you're using it now to network with producers, but what about when you started?
100%. And that, that has evolved in a really interesting way. Because yeah, when I that was part of how so I did some work with, at the time they were called OFAC, the Ontario Farm Animal Council, now Farm and Food, or part of Farm and Food Care. I coupled the Twitter account with a blog, and so for a couple of years I was regularly blogging, just and doing some video blogging. Probably if I had stuck with it, I could be hanging out with Zach Johnson and the Millennial Farmer, because that was the kind of thing I was doing back then, in terms of just taking a camera along and showing the day, kind of what would go on a pig barn. But life, that wasn't where life took me, and I ended up leaving the farm, my family's farm, in 2013, and didn't work in agriculture, or didn't work in primary agriculture until we founded our own farm, Amani Farms, in 2015. Anyway, so it changed, and so it moved for me as thinking that I could be some sort of a spokesperson for agriculture on the giant world wide web, or within Twitter, and focused again more on how can it advance our own interests, and how does it help us, and with a great side benefit, Jim, of I've got people that I've now met in real life and have been conversing with for over a decade. So you've got old relationships, and so it has very much become a networking um, piece. And it is really, I like it because there is, I would argue, at least it seems like there's a lot of pig farmers that are there. It's allowed me to connect with other people no different than me, other independent pig farmers in literally every part of the world, which is pretty cool.
So when we talk about parts of the world, tell me more about Stewart Skinner. I know you're an Ontario, Canada pig farmer. You touched on the family business with Stonaleen Farms, now Imani. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Stewart.
Yeah, well, I um I've I wasn't always I was not one of those kids that was like, I'm always going to be a farmer. That was not necessarily where I thought I was headed, for sure. Now that being said, as I was in my late teens and early 20s, I did see the draw in it, and I thought, I almost fell in love with my own ideal family. You know, you come home, you take over, and you grow what mom and dad built. But sometimes life throws you some curveballs, and so I think one of the things for me was allowing myself to be thrown the curveball, and instead of trying to say I got to keep plowing through this, change direction for a little while. And so as I just referenced earlier, like I did leave my family's business in 2013 and went on a bit of a journey. And I did spend a significant amount of time in Kenya and made some relationships with farmers there and helped just kind of um, clarify my own where I wanted to go. And then so I ended up working in politics for a little while. And that was a really unique opportunity to see things I never would have otherwise got to see. Even like something as simple as getting to tour the cement plant in St. Mary's, Ontario. Like getting to see the inside of some of these industries that I you know, as a pig farmer, right? You can't just call up St. Mary's Cement and be like, "Hey, can I have a tour of your plant, please?" So I got to see just so many cool things. I really grew a new appreciation for community. Um, but ultimately I did want to come back here and so my wife and I, one of the reasons I left the family business was the volatility in the pig industry from about 2006 to 2014 was very, it was very stressful. There was a lot of downs and not very many ups in that time period, and a lot of people in Ontario left the business. um and that took its toll on me. And so when we were looking at coming back to farming, or back to pig farming, we wanted to do it in a way that acknowledged the past stressors and acknowledge or tried to look at, okay, instead of us saying we need to change ourselves to fit somebody else's mold, can we build something that fits our mold while still, you know, utilizing the fact that we understand the basic tenets of pig farming. And so that's when we got into niche production. And we started working with some Mennonite and Amish producers and started growing into niche pork. And we've just kept working within that and have kind of carved out our own little space. And again, it's not without its trials and tribulations. Pig farming is pig farming, no matter who's eating the pork. Um, but it's been really interesting, and it's allowed us to grow as a family, and have our own pig farm, which we take a lot of pride in, and not to take away from multi-generational things either, at all. It's kind of cool that we built this.
You built it, you're starting a new one. And what about the name? Like how did you come up with the name? I think there's a story there.
Yeah, so Amani, the word Amani actually means faith in Swahili. And it's been really, when we came up with that name back in 2015, it was just an acknowledgement that it doesn't matter what your own personal religious convictions may be, but when it comes to farming, you have to have some faith. I mean, you put everything up, and there are certain things that you just cannot control. Yeah. And so it takes a lot of faith, and so that's where that name came from. I found it really cool that as our farm has grown and we've had some more employees, and again, it's hammered home just it doesn't matter what your religious convictions are. Acknowledging the role that faith can play and how that it actually can bring fulfillment to the job. Um, and so yeah, it's been a really cool evolution, but that is where the name came from. It is the Swahili word for faith.
What about what's it like being a pig farmer in Ontario? I think you're southwestern Ontario, a lot of flat land, rich agriculture land. What do people need to know? Are there any myths or
I think honestly, Jim, the best part of Ontario is the things you just said. We've got abundant clean water. Like, and you talk about Twitter and being able to connect with other pig farmers. I've chatted with pig farmers. Look, they have to pay a lot of money for water use. Other farmers that have to pay significant amounts of money to dispose of manure. Whereas we're able to leverage that and utilize it as a fertilizer source. So, you know, instead of paying to send it somewhere else, we're lowering the carbon impact of our cropping system by offsetting commercial fertilizer. Um, we have space. Even Sometimes we think of Southwestern Ontario, and yeah, there's a lot of people here, but from a global perspective, we have a lot of space here in all across Canada, even here in Southwestern Ontario. So we have so many excellent, just underlying fundamental production advantages. And then you throw on the fact that we've just got a phenomenal climate for growing grains. And one of the pieces that comes along with climate change, and there's a lot of negatives that come along with climate change, but in our particular region and for much of Canada, it is actually going to increase the amount of food that we can grow, and our production is going to grow up or go up. And so we're from there, you could not be in a better place, in my opinion, from a natural geographical standpoint. Even energy, talking with some of my pig farming friends in Denmark, and the amount that they're having to spend on energy is increasing significantly, whereas we happen to live in a country that is an energy exporter. So yeah, we've just got so many excellent fundamental advantages. I think our last frontier to really, I guess, well, I shouldn't even. We are a global player in the export market, but I think where we can muscle out even more is if we can address our domestic labor situation. If we right now, to me, it doesn't matter what type of pork you're producing. Canada's good at producing pork, and we can be competitive with every single jurisdiction in the world. And if we had a slightly improved labor situation in our processing sector right now, we would be taking market share hand over fist from the EU. And that's not sometimes I sound too bloodthirsty, I get, but that is economics. Global trade there's no loyalties in global trade. It's who can produce good pork the cheapest. And we're pretty good at it, and we can be even better.
So when you talk about losing some Ontario pig farmers, can we come back with that, do you think, or have we exhausted
If
that?
we addressed so Ontario specifically, and I think it's interesting, you can look at Ontario specifically, or you could look at Eastern Canada as a region. And I think when we talk about a global pork industry, we almost need to look at Eastern Canada. That being said, that ignores the unique relationship that exists in Canada between the two cultures, the English and French cultures, and just the differences that can bring about. But if we look at the Eastern Canada region, there's still room to grow, and the hooks are already there. The bricks and mortar are already there. We just need more people in the plants. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Eastern Canada could add 50,000 sows overnight if we were able to rapidly address the labor situation in Eastern Canadian processing, because we can be competitive on the feedstock, the pigs. We can be globally competitive, and we've got the space to grow, and we have the wherewithal to grow. Even though the group has shrunk, we hear the lowest number I've heard is 250. The highest number I hear is 500 when we talk about decision makers here in Ontario. But that group has an immense amount of knowledge and has the ability to produce more pork, 100%. Not to mention people can get into this industry, like new entrants can come.
So one of the key things you just touched on that we're going to talk about next is how do we reach a decision maker? So I've noticed over the last 15 years, there's been a swift change in how we make decisions, how we reach decision makers. Are there like 3 core attributes that you utilize as a decision maker in a hog operation?
I think one of the kind of an overarching theme is I want to have my mind pretty much made up actually before I talk to anybody. And that maybe that sounds a bit backwards, but I can be a victim for a good sales pitch. And I shouldn't even, victim is not the right word. My brain can be changed, or my mind can be changed by a good approach.
A good
And
presentation.
pardon me.
A good presentation.
Yes. So I've again, and just my own personal evolution. I essentially want to have a good idea myself, and so that means that the web is my primary method of collection. So I may not talk to a sales person But I've watched 17 different videos on YouTube of that particular technology. Um, and then I might talk to the sale. Like I might make contact after. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I want this. I want to talk about how it could work with
Yeah.
them. That's kind of my own process now. I think I honestly I don't know. I think because there aren't a lot of us here, I think a lot of us are individuals. Like I think there's some that still love having a cup of coffee with a sales guy just to catch up. There's some that probably want to have their mind 100% made up and don't ever want to talk to anybody. It's I think very wide variety.
So for you, it's not clear cut in making a decision with a salesperson or going to a trade show and making a decision. You're kind of intaking information, consistently researching on the web, talking on Twitter, and having a really good idea of what you need before then reaching out. So it's important that people plant seeds and plant good information to help you make a decision.
Yeah, with one qualifier there, because you brought up trade shows and you got the posters for the World Pork Expo behind you. Um, Trade shows still play a role for me 100%. Because I a video is good, but it does not being able to touch, especially for like, say if we were looking at doing fixing up a finishing barn and I was going to replace the feeders.
Yeah.
Again, I'd probably watch some videos or do some chatting with some guys. But I, I actually was at the World Pork Expo this year, and one of the biggest things was I have not been at a trade show for a while. That is the best one for because there are companies that just you can't find everything on the internet easily, right? And so even this year, we didn't bring back an awful lot of new stuff, but it was a good. You get your hands on things, and yeah, so trade shows actually still play an important role for me. Um,
You went to Des Moines and then you went to the Quebec show in December, right?
yes, yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and it probably some of the trade shows bring everything to light, all your research, and then you see everybody on one floor and can have a good discussion. Kind of like an auto show as a consumer. You go to an auto show and see everything in the floor and you do all your homework before then.
Well, and it gets you dreaming, right? Like you see something cool. Like I was at the pork show, something that I'd never seen on the internet before. But there's a company out of Quebec that's got a neural network program that works with a camera to count pigs going
Okay.
on a truck. And yeah, I didn't. I it's really cool technology. Like I don't have the ability to program a neural network. I'm not going to be writing algorithms anytime soon. But I do know I mess up my pig counts from time to time. So, or almost every time. So, that there's a good example of the importance of a trade show, things that you haven't even thought about yet. At one of the things at Des Moines that was looking at some manure dewatering equipment. Again, not something we do, not even something we thought about very much. But when we're looking ahead down the road at where this business might be going, it just cool stuff to get your hands on and touch and see and then you actually have a better idea when you want to do your next level of research.
Were you at the World Pork for one day or the whole time?
We only did one day at the show. We drove because we actually drove and we actually we doubled up. We actually bought a livestock trailer from a spot a couple hours north of Des Moines. So we spent one full day at the show and then we went and bought it was a show pig guy. So our pigs get to ride in style now. It's a show pig trailer. So
You ready for some rapid fire?
yeah, sure.
Standout year to date.
Well, that's an interesting one when we're 5 days into the year. I think one of the things really interesting to keep our eye on for this year is I don't think the industry is going to grow. When we look at North America as a whole, I don't know. I don't see too many scenarios where there's rapid expansion. And even reading, one of the commentaries I like to read every week is Jim Long's commentary, and him just outlining recently the reduction in the last couple of years. Like it is not a small number of pigs that we've taken out of the North American pipeline. So it's going to be a very curious year, because if you don't see any significant expansion, you see an entire year of lower inventories. I think that points to hopefully, knock on some wood, it should be a pretty darn good year to be a pig farmer. Um, so yeah, that'd be something I feel that expands. As long as we don't see any expansion in the first half of this year, it should be a pretty darn good year.
Biggest on-farm disease challenge you faced to date?
Well, that's an interesting or loaded question. For the first 4 years, because we within all of our niche markets, we can only use antibiotics on an individual level, so we can't do any kind of broad spectrum stuff. And so you do have fewer tools when you deal with diseases. And in 2021, we did what we call the swine disease retro tour, and that we had about a 20-year-old strain of APP show up. We had some PRRS, which isn't it is retro and new because it's been going on for so long now. We had mycoplasma break in one of the sow herds, and then we topped it all off with rhinitis. We have no idea how it got into our system, but we ended up with rhinitis in our where we multiplied our gilts. So we did that. It wasn't just one big disease. It is quite the thing when you're in a RWA situation and you're dealing with a whole bunch of bugs at once. That being said, gave us a really good opportunity to learn and become better at animal husbandry, and the ability to individually treat. When you do it well and you do it strategically, you save a lot of pigs. And yeah, so it gave us it was more of that cocktail versus any one, and it kind of hit one after the other. It was almost like every other month we were getting some test results back, and it was like, when is this going to end? And so it has now, knocking on some wood, and we're getting reminded now how much more fun it is to be a pig farmer when you've got good health in the barn.
I don't know if you've heard, we've launched a Swine Hall of Fame. Any thoughts on Joe Connor, Dr. Joe Connor, or Bill Prestige being inducted?
I don't have strong thoughts. I must admit, I don't know those names very well at all.
US based US based guys. We'll send you the plaques. We'll take a look at that. One word to describe the term family farm.
Ooh, oh boy. Is trying to figure out a way to do this without being cliche. It's not easy. Um, I think if I'm gonna have to use one word, I am going to say diversity, and not maybe in the traditional sense of how general society would view diversity, but more, there are so many different types of operations, family operations. Well, now that some of the largest integrators in the US that have hundreds of thousands of sows are actually just a network of like-minded independent farmers, and family farms. So those are family farms. Our farm is a family farm. My parents' cropping operation, that's a family farm. Family farm, pretty much every farm that is there is still a private family business, because institutional money looked at the margins as like, this is terrible, we don't want to do that. So yeah, I guess I had to give a long-winded explanation, because I do really think that if you wanted to try to capture with one word, it has to be that it's diverse, because just there is not one type of family farm, there's so many.
And also in the pig industry, what's one innovative idea or product we need?
Well, I will admit to not understanding it properly, but I think some of the stuff that companies like Boehringer are working on, where they're looking at incorporating AI into essentially enhancing our ability to be animal husbandry, or to be proper farmers. I don't understand that world at all. I can't even try to pretend to get my brain to understand even the notion of an algorithm that continues to teach itself like that. It baffles me. It seems scientific, yet, or I mean, like a sci-fi movie, but yet at the same time, it's an area where I think we're going to see some really amazing opportunities. We like I referenced that, that those issues with diseases that we worked through, and um, early intervention is key. And we've known that for a while, but when we have technology to, like the camera that right now it counts pigs, wait till we have a camera that can monitor pigs and shoot me an alert to say this barn has not had an optimum amount of activity level, and the pigs are throwing a temperature of 3 degrees higher than normal. Like that will be here, in my and that will enhance our capacity so much. I don't think it will replace us, at least not in my lifetime. But maybe it will. I don't know. Like, but my yeah. Again, I'm too long winded to your to rapid fire questions, Jim. But that space, that artificial intelligence space, um, fascinates me because of its ability to take on tasks that to date we have not been able to use technology for in pig farms.
Yeah, I don't think it'll replace you. I think it might aid in assistance. It might aid in any labor issues and just help with efficiency.
Well, and I'm really hopeful that we see those gains in the processing sector as we can improve the ability for machines. Like, when you talk to a processor now, that yeah, there are robots available for certain processes. And some of them are really great and are more competitive than and have that's like you've seen certain ones where almost every plant has adopted them, and whereas there's certain other robots that are still in their infancy for cutting where the yield loss is just a little too high that you can't replace the human labor in that front. I think that as we see smarter robots in the processing sector, that's going to make that sector more competitive. And I think from a more of a at a higher societal level, we are in a period of demographic change that we cannot get out of for the next 15 years, where it's going to be a good thing when we can replace humans because we're going to need them in other places, where they can't. We aren't going to have AI is not going to be able to help us with our aging population. I mean, whereas it could hopefully help us run an effective kill plant, or an effective cut floor, so that those people can be freed up to go do the things that we won't be able to do with AI.
So we got a final question here, Stuart. How do you match a personal and corporate vision versus social responsibility, profit, and longevity?
You know, I have tried more over the last year, especially as we've grown our own farm team, and we've moved away from we've essentially went from having almost 100% contract production to a significant percentage of it where we're doing it ourselves with hired labor. And that we've taken an unconventional route compared to some other pig farms, and that we're not utilizing offshore labor, and we're working with, and we've actually hired people from outside of the animal industry with other skills that we saw might help us, and have worked to teach the pig farming. But that process is just, that's actually at a higher level has opened my eyes to the importance of trying to create a workplace and a business that offers fulfillment for its employees, fulfillment for its owners, from the fulfillment for the suppliers and the customers. And there is always a financial component to that when we're working within business. I mean, nobody's feeling fulfilled if they're losing money. That just is. Um, but yeah, and it really came from having some younger people around our farm. We're really lucky that, and I've started to bristle almost when people complain about young people, because I'm like, I don't know. We've found that when we tried to adapt our systems to what they've asked for, they've been pretty awesome. No one's perfect, but it's, and where I'm going with all of that is when I was a kid, and I talked about this with an old friend, but when I was a teenager, I did not care about the job. I cared about who paid me the most money. And that's why I ended up working at a feed mill and reffing hockey. Those were the two most lucrative jobs I could get with my skill set. And then if I had a conflicting opportunity between reffing hockey or doing the feed mill, I did the reffing of hockey because it was better per hour. Like I was entirely financially driven. I don't believe that that's the case as much anymore. There needs to be a sense of accomplishment that comes along, and the financial. There's no willingness to relax. But anyway, again, I'm rambling to what are supposed to be rapid fire questions, but I've really tried to focus on that. Are we providing opportunities for fulfillment with the people that we work with? And that's, yeah, it's a different mindset than I used to have.
So you evolve, you've evolved.
Yeah, yes, I have. I have. It's the 2.5+ years of challenging social upheaval. I think everybody came out on the other side feeling different. And I think for myself, it came with a period of time of not really being happy about feeling different, and being kind of like, ugh, I'm angry that everything isn't the way it used to be, and an acknowledgement that that's a pretty crappy way to live. And so trying, it's not always easy, but trying to stay focused on looking ahead and the now. And that part of that was trying to look around me and see what we can do to build a better mousetrap here at our business.
Well, this is a really enlightening conversation, Stewart. Thanks for joining us today on In Swine Versation.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciated it.